It's hard to believe, but today we celebrate a building, but not any ordinary building. Today we celebrate St. John Lateran Basilica in Rome, the mother church. Now I know a lot of people say, Father Leo, we're the church. It's not brick and mortar, and that is so true. The church in its wisdom, choosing the readings that it chose today, make that abundantly clear. St. Paul speaks very clearly. You are holy. You are God's building. You are the temple of the Spirit. You are, in fact, the living stones. And I have come to see that in you. But the church is also called to gather together in holy time and holy space. Because it's within these walls that disciples are formed. This is the womb of the church, where children of God are born. This is where we are conformed to Christ. For St. Paul says about the foundation that is ours, that it is built upon Christ. And so it is here that we hear his word proclaimed, that we receive the sacraments, that we are conformed and drawn into the very life and love of God. The prophet Ezekiel expresses it so beautifully. He's speaking God's word when he gives us this image of flowing waters moving out from the church and changing the world, nourishing the world through you, through his mystical body. That is true not only of St. John Lateran Church, one of the 4 great basilicas in Rome, but it is true of historic St. Mary's. We are a part of history. And this is where God's people gather together. There is no doubt that we have received a great blessing. We have been given a treasure by our ancestors. And it wasn't easy for them. When this was still Hickory Town, before it was changed to Lancaster, a Christian community began to gather here, a Catholic community, to celebrate the sacraments. And on this ground, purchased from William Penn's son, the first church was built. This was the wilderness. I love looking at this picture. I imagine on this hilltop over here, St. Joseph's Church. Many years later, this first church on this property faced great odds. There were enemies. And yet our ancestors were courageous. This church would be burned to the ground. Did that stop us? No. They rebuilt. Not a wood church, but a stone church, more sturdy than before. This church served us well as a community until 1852, when it was time to expand as the Catholic community continued to grow and grow in the community. And then we built our first brick church. You'll notice this church isn't as high as the one that we're in right now. Much more modest than the church we're in, but it served the community well. It's on the same corner that where we are right now. They had added property behind, not the final property, which is behind us. In this church, you'll notice that there is no sacristy behind the main altar. The church ends right at the last window there. Now this church, we burned down with a faulty heating system. It was part of God's plan. They regrouped. And through great sacrifice, they built the church. Whoop. This is our modern church. It still has a stone church beside it. It doesn't have the convent or the school building yet. And yet this is the church that our ancestors built, that we're sitting in today. You'll notice that the sacristy is still not behind it yet. That would be added a little later. But the main part of the my batteries died. And they did it well. A transcendent church, a church that lifts our hearts and minds to God. Who doesn't enter this church and feel the presence of God? The presence of Christ in the Eucharist in our tabernacle. The presence of our patron Mary. Each one of us has stories about people that we've invited to come to the church and how they stood in awe of this sacred and beautiful space. It is truly a treasure. And it has served us well for 147 years. We have taken advantage of and benefited from their sacrifices, those who went before us. But the reality is, as we move into the future, our physical limitations are becoming an impediment to our ministry, to our people who want to gather here to celebrate, to those who just want to get in the church, in our educational building, our social area. And so when Bishop Rhodes designated this through his petitioning of Rome, that we be a pilgrim site, with a special spiritual connection with St. Mary Major in Rome, we became a site where travelers come to experience the blessing that is ours every week. And he told us at that time that we needed to work for accessibility, to make our buildings more accessible. Now, when we first looked at this, we were only looking at the church building. And we thought about raising the elevation of the ground outside, so that people could just walk in the front doors of the church, which was lovely, but it was a lot of money for dirt. And it didn't solve many of our other needs. And at that town hall meeting, there were parishioners, who came to us and they said, Father Leo, what about the other buildings? What are your plans for those? And it wasn't long after that we had to start looking at those buildings. But after that money for dirt design, we looked subterranean. We looked at going underground in front of our church and along the side, which would have helped us with some aspects of our accessibility. Putting in an elevator in that corner would have helped us go from outside and up. But the problem with that design was downtown at about that same time, maybe you remember this, they were digging along a foundation and a whole building collapsed. And people didn't like the idea of us digging along the foundation of our church or on the sides. It's a beautiful plan. But again, very expensive, fraught with many engineering challenges, and it didn't address the needs we had for our full facility. It was around this time that we started thinking about connecting the church with the convent, as long as we could provide access to the courtyard behind. Unfortunately, our plans for getting access to that courtyard so that we could have deliveries, so that we could do maintenance work back here, so that the many people who come here in the evenings for our ministries and for our activities could have a safe haven to park back here. Because of trying to keep this open, the connector did not seem feasible and didn't seem to work for us. Of course, through town hall meetings, through meeting with ministry leaders and getting tons of ideas, by your letters and responding to our web page, we got all kinds of ideas that we tracked down Of course, we have a lot of challenges on our property. For one thing, we have to meet the requirements of the Historic Society here in Lancaster, which greatly limits some of the changes that we can make. Many of the changes you proposed would not fly by the Historic Society. We also talked to the Lancaster City Planning Commission, as well as we've been in contact with the diocese, talking to them. And they certainly all want us to have a successful plan. But we have limitations. We're landlocked. We have very little space between our buildings, and now with the emphasis on water runoff, there's very little we can do about adding macadam and things like that. We have to be very careful with our water runoff. And so after a great deal of consultation and prayer, we have a plan. It is a master plan. And it takes into consideration so many of your wonderful ideas for us to move forward. This is a bird's eye view of the front of our property as it stands. And as you can see, there is very little accessibility. All of the buildings, let me go back here a second. I'm going the wrong direction. All of our buildings at this point are inaccessible. Now, we do have a ramp along this side which no longer meets code. It's out of view, and those who want to go back and use it have to drive in front of pedestrians here coming in and out of the church, which is a very dangerous situation. And because it doesn't pass code, we had to look at other options. And so this is what we've come up with. I'm going in the wrong direction again. Okay, there we go. We are going to be adding a plaza because just like Father Leo, you like to talk a lot after Mass. And we are so crowded in the front. These steps are uneven. They stick too far out in the sidewalk here. And so the city and the Historic Society, this wall was here in the past, although it was a flat wall in the past before the steps were added. They see this as a great area for us, and we see it as a great area for gathering before and after Mass. Great big plaza area up above. This still provides accessibility back to the rectory during the week and for deliveries, and accessibility to the courtyard. Accessibility to the school building in the front of the building. Another bird's eye view. One of the features of this plan is that it separates the pedestrian traffic from the vehicle traffic. Parking over in the parking garage, we can cross the street here and go up this protected walkway into this space. We would block off this area here so that cars could not drive in front of the church. So this would be all people gathering space in this area here. Okay. Another bird's eye view of that great gathering area for us. This is from the corner of Prince and Vine Street, our major corner for the city, and it provides great accessibility, a great welcome for people in the town to come up to our church. This is a view from our courtyard, and you'll notice that the build-outs, there's white build-outs here and here, which hides the beautiful architectural brickwork in our convent building connecting to the old school here. This would all be re-exposed, and we would put a handicapped accessible ramp here, and so that we could enter into a large hospitality area in this part of the building, and we would move our cafeteria and make a banquet hall on the first floor, so that all of this floor is for us, for hospitality, for our gathering, for our celebrations. This is that floor as you come in. This is all hospitality space where we'd have archive displays in here. We'd have a small meeting room, large accessible restrooms here. We would open up all this stairwell area, and we would put the nursery here. You come down the hallway into a large banquet hall that would hold over 200 people on this floor. The choir room would be here, along with the catechesis, the Good Shepherd room would be here. We would renovate all the bathrooms. We would put a warming kitchen right outside the banquet hall, so that preparing a meal in the kitchen, the food can be put on the elevator, brought up one floor, and then brought from the elevator to the hot warming room, warming kitchen, prepared to be brought over to serve the banquets right here. And so this is all wonderful
accessible hospitality space for us. In the basement, we would put, where the cafeteria is now, 5 classrooms. This would be the sub-basement going down to the custodial rooms and storage down there. Our kitchen with the elevator going down here. Our Colby room, which is adult education. Colby room, which is adult education. We would add another education room right here, as well as 2 restroom facilities, 2 toilets right there, along with storage. Again, we would renovate all of this space. This is the 3rd floor, again, accessible at last by an elevator so that all of our parishioners can attend events up here with our stage, whether we put on programs or need overflow area for our banquet facilities. This would be another classroom. We would move the youth ministry rooms to this floor, have an office for our youth minister, as long as lounging areas, and the chapel also at one phase would be updated. The 3rd floor, the upper floor above this one in the convent that is currently the youth rooms, would be converted over to our mechanical rooms, because the whole facility would be air conditioned and heated. Up there also would be some storage space, as well as temperature controlled room for our archives. This is truly a master plan. And the first thought in your mind, I'm sure, is, Father Leo, what does this cost? Let me assure you right now, we are not going to go in debt over this, okay? We're not. We're going to sacrifice for this, but we're not going to go into debt over this. That means that for this grand plan, we may have to do it in phases, and we're looking at phases. Now, the cost of this project is just barely over $6 million. If we spread it out over many, many, many years, then we will be facing some inflationary figures in that $6 million. However, hopefully if we proceed as we hope, it will be just over $6 million. So we will do it in phases. We will do it in phases. It is a master plan. We will certainly address our accessibility issues and our restroom issues. Now, you'll notice that there was nothing done in the church itself. At every town hall meeting we had, and all the comments we received, and we received tons of information, and we tracked down all of this information, people told us over and over again, do not touch the church. Now, as you know, we've cleaned all the statues, we've done work on the marble, we've painted the inside of the church, we're redoing the Stations of the Cross. We upkeep the church, but we are not doing any major changes in the church. This back bathroom back here, we have looked at the possibility of expanding that to make that more accessibility. But as all of you know who spend time in that vestibule, our space is very limited in that space. So, a master plan. After Mass today, Kevin Malloy, our chairperson for our Legacy Committee, as well as Legacy Committee members, will be available outside with all of these pictures to answer your questions. In your bulletin this weekend, you will see a tear-out with a few of the pictures of the Legacy Project, as well as some bullet points from my talk today. So please take time for these. And also on our website, we'll be putting this same information out there for you. We are in dialogue with the diocese, with the city. We certainly have been in dialogue with you, and we are so grateful for the wonderful ideas. This is a project we can embrace, a project we can do. Make no mistake about it, you are the church. You are holy, the mystical body of Christ. But each one of us can tell a story. Each one of us has history here. Each one of us knows how in this holy and sacred space we have been conformed by Christ. We have been touched by Christ. We have been so blessed. And now it's our turn to be a blessing to our children and future generations.